Hey guys, we are back with another advanced Adobe Illustrator tutorial. This time we will be creating a low poly crosshatch vector portrait. It is a mouthful, but trust me, that's the easiest way I've found to describe it. We will cover a lot of things, including creating crosshatch patterns, drawing polygons efficiently with the path, average and join features, creating variations with the transform panel settings, using an opacity mask for coloring, and so much more. As always, this video will demonstrate that it is about the clever combination of techniques that leads to great results. So first of all, I would like to show you how I created the crosshatch patterns, because that's obviously crucial for this artwork. Each of these triangles have crosshatch on them. That's what I used instead of colors or shading. And obviously wherever I wanted to have darker details, so basically the shadows, in this case the hair, I used more dense patterns, so the lines are closer to each other, while highlights are empty polygons or triangles, and then the midtones are the more loose patterns, so I just reduced the density of the lines. But the lines are actually all the same thickness, apart from the outlines obviously. So if I turn off my outlines, you can see all these lines are the same thickness. Now let's see how I created these patterns. I just have this a separate file which lists all the different angles that I created, and you can actually see all of these swatches here on the right side as well. I'm going to show you how this works, but for our members here on YouTube, we give this file and you will be able to use these swatches, so it's all pre-made and you can download it. If you are not already a member, the link is in the description below. But let me show you how to create this. So it doesn't take too long to create it. It's quite simple if you know how to do it. First of all, you want to have a single line created. In this case, I'm going to draw maybe a horizontal line. So I hold down the Shift key. And once you drew a line, your best bet to make changes to this is the stroke and the transform panels. But most importantly, the transform panel, because that's where you have the line properties. So this is really useful. This is where you can set up the length of the line. So you can type in, let's say 5 millimeters, or you can type in 1, whatever you wish. I'm just going to do 5 millimeters for now. And before we turn this into a pattern, it's best to create also a rectangle or square around it. So for this, I'm just going to use the rectangle tool, click once and type in 5 and 5 millimeters. This rectangle should be transparent, so I'm going to remove the stroke and fill colors. Select these two shapes and align them to each other. So horizontally and vertically align them to each other. Now, if we look at this in outline view, that's Command or Control Y, we can see that this is how it looks like. So once we select them together, we can go into the object menu and choose Pattern Make. And that's going to create our repeated pattern, where the empty or invisible rectangle is the tile or the bounding box, and at this point that even can be deleted. It's not necessary anymore because it was only used to generate the tile, but after that we can take it off. As you can see it's going to still work. And the most important thing is that the tile can be adjusted later as well. So using this pattern tile tool from the pattern options dialog, you can drag it closer to the shape, and best to do it by holding down the Alt key. That way both edges move at the same time, so Alt or Option key, and that way we can make it more dense, the actual pattern. The line thickness doesn't change, it's the density that I'm adjusting, and we can set it higher as well. So it's like an accordion really, the way it works. Now if I want, I can also be more precise and set the height here. So I can just type in, let's say 3, and then I know exactly that there is 3 millimeters for each tile. Now the width doesn't really matter at this point, because if I make it smaller, the lines just going to overlap each other. But if I make it wider, like 10 millimeters, then obviously we will start to see gaps between the lines, which can also serve as an interesting pattern. But for the crosshatch technique, I'm just going to go back to 5 millimeters, which was the original line length. So if I want to save this as a swatch, all I have to do is to click on Done here on the top. And we have our new pattern here on the bottom. Now notice that I already have all these swatches here that I generated. So if I just go back to the artboard here on the left, you can see I created different density for vertical and horizontal lines, but I also created the angles. So I have 30 degrees right and left, 45 degrees same, and again 60 degrees. So these are a little bit more tricky, and the way I start creating them is similar, but the only difference is that without the rectangle, so I'm not using the rectangle, I'm selecting the line and using again the transform panel, I choose the angle I wish to work with, let's say 30 degrees. And before I create the pattern, what's very important is that in this case, the line should be set to invisible, so no stroke, no fill. Just going to remove both of those, and having this selected, I can go into the object menu and then choose pattern, make. Now in this case, the tile will be set up based on this line. So the height and the width are both calculated based on this line, and because it's on an angle, it basically defines a rectangle for our tile. So if I just select this line here and set it back to, let's say, 0.5 millimeter thickness, you can see the pattern is working. Now believe me, if you're not doing this with an invisible line, you will be struggling with the alignment. So this is definitely the quickest and easiest way of doing it. And I experimented a lot until I came up with this technique, so hopefully this will save you time and effort. So similarly to before, if I just click on done, now we have two of these patterns, and let's see how they work. If I select or create a shape like this one here, and I make sure I'm on the fill color, I can now choose my horizontal line or the 30 degrees diagonal lines. Now, sometimes you need to zoom in closer to be able to see the lines better, because Illustrator is not always rendering these lines perfectly. That is just something that will disappear once you print it out or save it as a PDF or JPEG or what have you. So yeah, basically that's all you need to know to create these pattern swatches. But maybe one additional thing I wanted to show you is that if you start a new document and you know that you have these swatches set up in another file, you can go into the swatches panel, and from this little menu here, I'm just going to make this smaller so you can see it, the library drop down, you can choose other library, and all you have to do is to just select the file in which you know that the swatches are saved, which is in this case was this file. If I choose open, you can see that all those swatches are now brought in, and from my main swatch library, I can even choose select all unused, delete all of that, and then I can just select the swatches that I need, let's say up to here, and then from the panel menu we can just choose add to swatches, and voila, we have all of these swatches imported. So for our members here on YouTube, this is the way you will be able to quickly import these swatches and start working with them. Now that we have all our crosshatch pattern swatches, we are ready to start drawing the polygons or triangles. And I'm going to show you again how I've done that. But if you are interested to see the whole workflow, at the end of the video, I have a time lapse in which you can see the whole creation process, which took around 2 hours. I think it only makes sense to look at time-lapse videos if you first understand the actual techniques involved. So that's why I keep it at the end. But as I said, first, let me show you how I draw the polygons. Now, it's a very simple method, but it still involves a couple of techniques and shortcuts that can save you a lot of time. So first of all, I use a graphic style to make sure that my triangles use the same appearance. So you can set these up from the window menu and choosing graphic styles. So there's the panel. So if I start drawing, and it feels like my line thickness is not the same, that is because I'm not using the graphic style. Once I click on that, you can see it applies it. And there's a couple of additional things I have here, like the corner set up to be a round join and so on and so forth. So this is all saved here. Whenever you have an appearance that you want to save, just go to graphic styles and click on new option. And that way you can always just click on it to apply it. It works similarly to a swatch, but it combines everything that you have on the appearance of an object. So for example, I could select one of these triangles and save it as a graphic style, and that way I can very quickly reapply that on another triangle as well. So that will include both the stroke and fill attributes. But coming back to drawing the polygons, I'm going to use the pen tool for this process. And I like to have my smart guides on because that can help me to see the anchor points. Now, if you turn that off, so from the view menu, you turn off smart guides, you might not necessarily find these anchor points as easily. So that's why I like to have the smart guides on. Plus with that one, you can even align your starting points to the line itself. So not necessarily an anchor point, but even the line itself, like that. Now I'm going to draw a triangle, maybe starting from here, come down, and then close it up. I like to close the triangles, even though it's not always necessary, but that just works better. And when you have a triangle ready, you can select each of these points and move them around. So if you change your mind, you can connect it to another area. You can select any of these corner points and move them around. But here's another cool technique. If you decide that you want to break up a shape a bit more and you decide to draw another triangle, just start drawing it. So let's just say maybe start drawing it from here, connect there, there, and there. Now these 2 points I can select together with the direct selection tool, and I can move them together around. So that's definitely useful. Sometimes when you have multiple points that you wish to connect, like here, I'm just going to move these points around a bit. And let's say they were not aligned or maybe even overlapping each other. I can select all of them together quickly. So selected all those tips of the triangles and then use Object, Path, Average, or Command Option J, Control Alt J on PC to get this little dialog box where you choose both, and once you click OK, it will move them all into the same point. It creates an average point from all of them. So it finds like the center point of that selection and moves all selected anchor points in that point. So now I can move them all together around like a spider web. So that is extremely useful technique. And something similar to that is when you have a shape which is not closed, you can select these 2 points quickly, use the shortcut, which first creates the average, and then if you want to make sure that they are joined as well, you can use Command or Control J, which is join, and you can see how it became a closed shape. Now if I keep it open like this, I'm just going to keep it even further apart, and I have the whole shape selected, and then I use Command or Control J, it will automatically close the shape for me. And that is a good habit to get into, not keeping shapes open. So whenever you draw in Illustrator, it's best to keep them closed, especially if you are planning to sell your artwork on stock sites, because they will have issues with open shapes. So there's a quick way to fix that with these shortcuts that I just showed you. And to be honest, these 2 things were most important for creating this artwork. So first is to create my crosshatch pattern swatches and then to start drawing the polygons. And you can use a photo reference on a tracing layer, or you can just draw something completely on your own. It doesn't really matter, whichever works better for you. But before I show you the time lapse, I'm going to show you a few things that's going to blow your mind. First is a feature in the transform panel. So check this out. If I go to transform and on the top right corner, I choose transform object only. What that means is that when I'm resizing my illustration, the patterns won't be resizing at the same time. So notice that there are 3 options. You can also resize both the pattern and the object, or just the pattern only, or just the object only. But this is the cool one. If I choose transform object only, that means once I start changing the size of my illustration, and I'm actually just going to create a duplicate so you can see it better. Maybe even better if we have a duplicate of the artboard, and I create a bigger artboard just so we can have enough space to see the difference. And I select this, and using simply just scaling it up, holding down Shift key, I make the artwork bigger. But what happens is that the pattern is still going to have the same density. So when we compare it to the other one, you can see the density is the same, but on a bigger artwork. And obviously from a distance here on my screen, because of the resolution, it just can't show it properly, but that's basically how it works. Now, if I wanted to make the pattern or the thickness or density of my cross-hatching smaller, all I have to do is to select the whole thing and make it smaller than the original size. So if I put this next to the original one, check this out, if I zoom closer, and you can see that the density is smaller, but the stroke thickness didn't change. And that's also another thing that you can change in the transform panel. So when I select something, notice that there's also an additional option called scale, strokes, and effects. So currently, not only my pattern is not resizing when I'm scaling my illustration up and down, but also the stroke thickness is not changing, which allows for lots of different variations. So I can vary just the pattern size or the density, or just the stroke, or both, or none. So there's unlimited options here. So let me just show you this again. If I just undo this resize, I just go back and go back to the original size, select this and say I would like to scale the strokes but not the pattern, and I make it small, then again it's going to have a different result. So putting it here next to it, you can see now the triangles and the main outline are all smaller in thickness than the original one, but the pattern swatches are not resizing because we set it to only scale the object. As I said, you can create so many different cool variations just by playing with these two options in the transform panel. And if that wasn't enough, let me show you a couple of additional things. So I'm trying to raise the stakes here. Next feature that I wanted to show you is the symmetry feature, which I showed in previous videos, but here it's slightly different. I have a separate video on explaining how to draw in symmetry. That's in the description, so you can find it and check it out if you haven't seen it already. It's a very cool feature, but what I wanted to show you here is what happens if you use this feature in combination with pattern swatches. So notice what we have here is this effect already is working and I've set it up. So whenever I move one object on the right side, the symmetry or the reflection on the other side is changing as well. But can you notice something odd here? So is it completely symmetrical? It seems like everything is moving in symmetry. So when I'm moving these points around, it's happening on the other side as well. But notice that when I move these two objects together, it probably is easier to see. The reflection is not a perfect symmetry because the pattern swatch is not reflected. So the shape outline is reflected, but not the pattern swatch. So what that means is that using this feature, you can create a perfect symmetry, but it will still look slightly different because the crosshatch angles will be identical on both sides. So it will almost be like a confusing symmetry. So it will feel like it's symmetrical, but still slightly off, which is actually quite cool if you use on portraits because our face is not completely symmetrical. So this could actually help to create that illusion of imperfection. Now, the reason why I didn't use it in this case is because I wanted to draw both sides differently. So as you can see, I didn't use symmetry because there are different shapes on both sides completely. But that can be an interesting experiment for you to try out. So to combine these techniques and the transform effect, which I explained in the other video, and see what you come up with. If you ever create something based on our tutorials and you're sharing it on social media, make sure to include the hashtag YesI'mADesigner so we can find it and feature it in our videos, blog posts, or our social media channels. But I have one last trick to show you, and this is my personal favorite, so I intentionally kept it till the end. So I'm going to show you how to apply a gradient on this illustration. Now this could be very tricky if you try to do it in any other way, and again I experimented a lot until I came up with this solution. It's not complicated, but you have to use an opacity mask. And if you're not familiar with that, now you can learn how to apply it. So first of all, you need to select everything. So I just select the whole illustration and copy it. Then you can even turn off these layers and just create another layer on top of everything. And I'm just going to call this one color version. All right. Now I'm going to use the rectangle tool and just draw a big rectangle that pretty much covers the artboard. And notice that I already have a gradient swatch created here. I actually have two of them. Maybe this one will look better. And we don't need the stroke on this gradient, just simply a gradient fill like that. Now, once we have this rectangle created, what we need to do is to go to the transparency panel and click on Make Mask. By the way, if you ever need to find a panel that I'm using, just go to the window menu and you will have the list there for all the panels. But once you have your opacity mask added, you essentially have two options, whether to work on the illustration or the mask. If you click on the mask, which is this black square, you should see also in the layers panel that you are now in the opacity mask. And this is where you want to paste in the illustration that we've been copying. So Command F for Control F to paste it in exactly in the same position as the original one. Doesn't even matter if you don't paste it exactly there, but as long as it's somewhere in the center of the artboard, it's going to work. And then there's only one thing left to do is to click on Invert Mask. And voila, there's your beautiful gradient. And the coolest thing is if I switch back now to the artwork, so if I click on the actual color square or rectangle and press G on the keyboard, as long as the fill color is highlighted here in the toolbar, which you can do by pressing X on the keyboard, you will be able to drag your gradient around and apply it in all kinds of different angles. This tool, by the way, is called the gradient annotator. So you can drag it around. You can also move these colors up and down, decide where they should be. I can really create a cool transition like this. And you can also just double click on these colors and pick a different color just to see how it looks. What I found the easiest when I'm messing around with gradients is to add as many color stops as I wish. Let's say we just add another one in here. And then having the whole object selected, click on the recolor artwork option here on the top in the menu, where you can switch to the edit mode and you can easily move these points around. So I just find this the easiest and quickest way to experiment with the right transition. And I think that looks quite cool, something like that. And if I like this complementary color theme, I can even lock it with the little chain here and start spinning them around and see if there's a better combination of colors. But I actually like this muted look, something like that. So let me know in the comment sections which trick was the most useful for you, and also let me know what would you like to learn about. Is there any features in Illustrator that you're struggling with, or maybe illustration styles that you would like to learn how to recreate? But before we finish, as I promised, I'm going to show you now the actual time lapse of the full illustration process. So around 2 hours compressed into 1 minute. If you like this technique and want to see how this illustration is used in a Photoshop composition, check out Satori Graphics' video. You can find the link in the description below. Tom, a fellow designer and YouTuber, and I collaborated on this 2-part tutorial, and we're excited to see what you think. Let me know if you want to see more collab videos in the future, and any recommendations are welcome if you know of someone you would like us to work with. Let us know in the comment section what would you like us to cover next time on this series. Click on the link in the description or the join button to become a member if you want to work on future projects with us and see the whole design or illustration process live. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.